The massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber opened with a deep sound that echoed through the vast space. Hyun-woo walked forward with steady steps, his black diplomatic uniform marking him as Earth's ambassador. Behind him walked Jin-A, her military badges shining under the bright lights. The chamber was huge, big enough to hold 1,000 beings from across the galaxy. Around them sat the elder species in their special seats. The Zephyrians looked like giant crystals that glowed with blue light. The nebuloids were like clouds, of gas that changed colors as they spoke. The Deep Sworn lived in water tanks that let them move around the chamber. All of them had been part of the Galactic Council for thousands of years. Humans had been members for only 300 years. They were still called the young species, even though they had solved more problems than anyone else. Hyun-woo had spent his whole life working for peace between different worlds. Jin-A had led joint military forces that stopped wars before they could start. But today was different. The chamber was full of angry voices. The Velkari Empire had attacked the Thani colonies 3 days ago. The Thani were peaceful people who had never hurt anyone. They grew beautiful gardens on their worlds and shared their knowledge of plants with everyone. Now their cities were burning and their people were dying. Taemin, another human diplomat, had asked the council to take action. He wanted to send ships to stop the Velkari before more Thani died. The request was simple and fair. The Velkari had broken galactic law by attacking without warning. The Thani had asked for help. It should have been easy to decide, but the elder species did not want to act. Elder Counselor Velzar of the Zephyrians spoke first. His crystal body flashed with cold light as he said that military action was too dangerous. The nebuloid representative, a cloud of green gas called Mist Wanderer, agreed that they should only send a message telling the Velkari to stop. Hyun-woo felt anger growing in his chest. He had seen this happen too many times before. When the Corvan pirates attacked trade ships, the council talked for months while people died. When the machine worlds went to war with their neighbors, the council sent letters instead of peacekeepers. Every time it was humans who finally solved the problems. Jin-A stood up and walked to the speaking platform. Her voice was clear and strong as she told the council about the Thani children who were dying right now. She showed pictures of burning cities and scared families running for their lives. She asked the council to remember their promise to protect all member species. The elder species listened but did not care. Counselor Deep Current of the Deep Sworn said that humans were too quick to use force. The crystalline beings nodded their approval. They said humans did not understand the complexity of galactic politics. Hyun-woo almost laughed at that. Humans had stopped 17 wars in the past 50 years. They had brought peace to species that had fought for centuries. They had built trade agreements that made everyone rich. They had created refugee programs that saved millions of lives. But the elder species called this too aggressive. The vote came quickly. The council decided to send a strong message of disapproval to the Velkari Empire. They would not send ships. They would not stop the killing. They would write a letter and hope the Velkari would read it and change their minds. Then came the real insult. Elder Counselor Velzar stood and said that humans needed to learn patience. He said that human warmongering tendencies were dangerous to galactic peace. The other elder species agreed. They voted to officially warn humanity about being too aggressive. Hyun-woo felt something break inside him. For 300 years, humans had given everything to the Galactic Council. They had sent their best people to serve. They had shared their technology and knowledge. They had risked their lives to keep peace, and now they were being blamed for caring too much about innocent lives. Jin-A was shaking with anger. She had lost friends in council peacekeeping missions. She had seen human soldiers die protecting other species. Now those same species were calling humans dangerous for wanting to help the Thani. The chamber became quiet as Hyun-woo walked to the center platform. Every being in the room watched him. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small metal badge. It was the symbol of Earth's membership in the Galactic Council. His family had been proud when he first received it. His children had touched it with wonder. Now it felt heavy and wrong in his hands. For 300 years, Hyunwoo said, his voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. Humanity has served this council with honor. We have given our lives, our knowledge, and our hope to the dream of galactic peace. We believed that together, all species could build something better than what any of us could create alone. The elder species watched him with their strange eyes. Some looked bored. Others looked annoyed that a human was speaking so long. Today you have shown us that this dream is false, Hyunwoo continued. You do not want partners. You want servants. You do not want our ideas. You want our obedience. You do not want justice. You want quiet. He held up the badge so everyone could see it. You call our desire to protect the innocent warmongering. You call our willingness to act aggression. You vote to condemn us for caring when others suffer. Jin-ae stood and walked to join him. Then Tae-min rose from his seat. Other humans in the chamber began to stand. Soon all 23 human representatives were standing together on the platform. If wanting to save the Thani makes us warmongers, Hyunwoo said, then we accept that label. If refusing to watch genocide makes us aggressive, then we are proud to be aggressive. If caring about justice makes us unfit for this council, then this council is unfit for us. The chamber erupted in shocked voices. The elder species had never seen anything like this. In thousands of years, no species had ever challenged the council's authority so directly. Hyunwoo placed his badge on the platform with a sharp click that somehow rang through the huge chamber. The Terran Federation formally withdraws from the Galactic Council. We will no longer pretend that talking about problems is the same as solving them. One by one, the other humans placed their badges next to his. Jin-ae was last. She looked directly at Elder Counselor Velzar as she set down her military insignia. When the Velkari come for you, she said quietly, remember that you chose this. The humans turned and walked toward the exit. Behind them, the chamber exploded with angry voices and confused shouts. Some species demanded they return. Others called them traitors. The elder species tried to restore order but failed. As they reached the doors, Hyunwoo heard someone calling his name. He turned to see So Young running toward them. She worked in trade coordination and had spent years building relationships with other species. Her face was wet with tears. They will not survive without us, she whispered. Hyunwoo looked back at the chaos in the chamber. The elder species were arguing among themselves. The younger species looked lost and scared. For a moment, he almost felt sorry for them. No, he said finally, they will not. But they made their choice. Now they must live with it. The humans walked out of the chamber and never looked back. Behind them, the Galactic Council continued to argue about what had just happened. None of them noticed that the lights in the chamber flickered as the human technicians began shutting down their systems. In 3 hours, every human ship would leave Council space. In 3 days, the galaxy would begin to understand what they had lost. 3 months had passed since the humans left the Galactic Council. So Young sat in her empty office on Earth looking at the messages that filled her computer screen. Every day brought more requests from alien species asking humans to come back. Every day she deleted them all without reading past the first few words. The news from Council space was getting worse. The first major crisis had started exactly 2 weeks after humanity's departure. The Mechanical Collective and the Biosynthesis Alliance had begun fighting again. These two species had hated each other for over 1,000 years. Their war had only stopped because human diplomats Minho and Yun-ji had spent decades building trust between them. Minho had been a patient man who understood how the machine people thought. Their minds worked like computers, following logical rules and patterns. But they could not understand emotions or feelings. Yun-ji had been the opposite. She was warm and friendly, perfect for dealing with the Biosynthesis Alliance, who were like living plants that felt everything very deeply. Together, Minho and Yun-ji had created the Kepler Accords. This was an agreement that let both species mine valuable metals in the Kepler expanse without fighting. The machine people got the rocky planets where they could build their factories. The plant people got the gas giants where they could grow their organic ships. For 50 years, this deal had kept peace between them. But now both species were claiming that the other had broken the agreement. The machine people said the plant people were stealing their metal. The plant people said the machine people were poisoning their growing grounds. Without Minho and Yunji to help them talk, neither side would listen to the other. The Galactic Council had sent their own diplomats to fix the problem. A team of Zephyrians arrived at the Kepler expanse with complete confidence. The crystal beings were very intelligent and had thousands of years of experience. They were sure they could solve a simple mining dispute. They were wrong. The Zephyrians spoke to both sides using pure logic and mathematical formulas. They explained exactly how much metal each species should be allowed to mine. They calculated the precise amount of gas each side could harvest. Their solution was perfectly fair and completely logical. Both species hated it. The machine people said the crystal beings did not understand their need for efficiency. The plant people said the cold calculations ignored their emotional connection to the growing grounds. Within days of the Zephyrian proposal, both sides declared war. The fighting started small, with single ships attacking mining stations, but it grew quickly. The machine people built robot fighters that could think and fight on their own. The plant people grew living ships that could heal themselves and work together like a forest. Soon, 17 star systems were full of burning ships and broken worlds. So Young read the reports with sadness but no surprise. She had tried to warn the Council that removing human diplomats would cause problems. The elder species had told her that any intelligent beings could learn to negotiate. They had been wrong about that, too. The second crisis was even worse. Space pirates had always been a problem in the outer regions of the galaxy. For decades, human patrol fleets had kept them under control. Captain Jun Seo had been the most famous of these human commanders. His ship, the Iron Will, had captured over 300 pirate vessels. Jun Seo understood how pirates thought because he had grown up poor on a rough world. He knew they were not just criminals, but desperate, people trying to survive. Sometimes he would fight them. Sometimes he would offer them honest work instead. Always he would make sure they knew that attacking innocent people would bring swift punishment. The Council had replaced Jun Seo with Commander Drift Essence, a nebuloid who had studied space combat for over 200 years. On paper, Drift Essence was perfectly qualified. The gas being had written several books about military strategy and had advised many successful campaigns, but Drift Essence had never actually fought pirates before. The commander's strategy was to avoid direct confrontation and instead use psychological pressure to make pirates surrender. This meant sending threatening messages instead of patrol ships. It meant trying to negotiate with people who only understood strength. The pirates quickly realized that the new patrols were weak. Trade routes that had been safe for generations became hunting grounds. Merchant ships that had traveled alone for decades now moved in large groups with hired guards. Even then, many were attacked and robbed. The worst incident happened near the sanctuary worlds, where millions of refugees lived in camps. These people had lost their homes to wars and disasters. They depended on supply ships bringing food and medicine to survive. Human security forces had always made sure these ships arrived safely. Now the supply convoys were easy targets for pirates. 3 food ships were captured in 1 week. Medicine meant for sick children was stolen and sold to rich worlds. Thousands of refugees began to starve because they could not get the help they needed. Jin had been the human coordinator for refugee services on SciFiPrime. She had spent 15 years building hospitals, schools, and housing for people who had nowhere else to go. When the order came for all humans to leave Council space, she had cried for 3 days. The day she left was one of the hardest of her life. Thousands of refugees came to watch her ship depart. They did not blame her for leaving, but they were scared about what would happen next. Children who had learned to read in her schools gave her drawings they had made. Families who had been saved by her medical clinics brought her flowers from their small gardens. "Promise you will come back," a young refugee had whispered to her. Jin had not been able to make that promise. Now, 3 months later, she sat in her new home on Earth and read reports about the chaos on Sanctuary. The refugee camps were falling apart without human management. Different alien species did not know how to work together to provide services. Food was running low. Medicine was almost gone. Disease was spreading because the water treatment plants were breaking down. The Galactic Council was trying to help, but they did not understand how to manage refugees from so many different species. Each alien type had different needs for food, air, and living space. Humans had spent decades learning how to balance all these requirements. The Council was learning that this knowledge could not be replaced quickly. Meanwhile, the Council was receiving more bad news from other parts of the galaxy. Communication networks were starting to fail because human technicians were no longer available to maintain them. Some worlds were losing contact with their neighbors. Trade became harder when merchants could not send messages to arrange deals. Power. Plants on dozens of worlds were having problems because humans had designed many of their safety systems. Artificial gravity generators were shutting down because only human engineers understood how to calibrate them properly. Even simple things, like air recycling systems, were failing without human maintenance. The worst news came from the Nexus Trade Network. This was a complex system of agreements that controlled how different species traded with each other. Human economists Wu Jin and Ye Jin had spent 50 years building these agreements. They understood how to balance the needs of hundreds of different worlds and species. Without their expertise, trade disputes were becoming common. Species were arguing about prices, delivery schedules, and payment methods. Some worlds were stopping all trade with their neighbors. Others were trying to cheat by changing the agreed prices. The whole system was starting to collapse. Da-Yun worked for Earth's intelligence service. Her job was to monitor communications from Council space and report back to the human government. Every day she read hundreds of messages that showed how badly things were going wrong. The funniest messages came from the Council leadership itself. They kept insisting that everything was under control. They published reports saying that the problems were temporary and would be solved soon. They held meetings where they congratulated themselves for handling the crisis so well, but their private messages told a different story. Da-Un read emails where Council members admitted they were in serious trouble. She saw secret reports that said the situation was getting worse every day. She watched as the elder species began to blame each other for the disasters that were happening. The most interesting message came from Elder Counselor Velzar himself. In a private communication to another Zephyrian leader, he wrote, "We may have made an error in judgment regarding the human species. Their contributions to galactic stability appear to have been more significant than we calculated." Da-Yun laughed when she read that message. It was the closest thing to an apology the crystal beings were capable of making, but it was too little and too late. The humans had made their decision and would stick to it. On Earth, President Dong-Hoon received dozens of requests every day from Council species asking for help. Some offered money. Others promised special trade deals. A few even offered to share advanced technology if humans would return to help them. Dong-Hoon's answer was always the same. He would not even read the messages. His secretary had orders to delete them all immediately. "They had 300 years to treat us as equals," he told his advisors. "They chose to treat us as servants instead. Now they can solve their own problems." 1 year had passed since humanity left the Galactic Council, and the galaxy was falling apart. Kyung-min sat in his office on Earth, watching the news feeds from across the galaxy. Every day brought reports of new disasters, new wars, and new suffering. He had been a strategic military advisor for 20 years before the humans left Council space. Now he could only watch as everything he had helped build crumbled into chaos. The communication networks were failing first. For centuries, quantum relay stations had connected distant parts of the galaxy, allowing instant messages between worlds that were thousands of light years apart. These stations were incredibly complex machines that needed constant maintenance and careful calibration. Human engineers had been responsible for most of this work because they had an unusual talent for understanding hybrid technologies. The alien species had tried to maintain the relays themselves, but they kept making mistakes. The crystalline Zephyrians understood the quantum physics, but could not handle the biological components that made the system work. The plant-like biosynthesis alliance could manage the living parts but had no knowledge of the mechanical systems. The gaseous nebuloids could process the energy flows but could not make physical repairs. One by one, the relay stations went dark. First, the outer rim systems lost contact with the core worlds. Then entire sectors became isolated from their neighbors. Trade became almost impossible when merchants could not communicate with distant customers. Military commanders could not coordinate with their fleets. Governments lost touch with their colonies. The infrastructure problems were even worse. Human engineers had designed or improved power systems on thousands of worlds. They had built the safety protocols that kept fusion reactors from exploding. They had created the computer programs that controlled artificial gravity generators. They had written the maintenance schedules that kept life support systems working properly. Without human expertise, these systems began to fail. The first major disaster happened on New Corva, a mining world where 3 million people lived in underground cities. The atmospheric processors that created breathable air started malfunctioning. The alien technicians tried to fix them, but accidentally made the problem worse. Within a week, the air became poisonous and everyone had to be evacuated. Similar accidents happened on dozens of other worlds. Gravity generators failed, crushing buildings and killing thousands of people. Fusion reactors overloaded, creating radioactive wastelands. Water treatment plants stopped working, causing disease outbreaks. Food processing facilities broke down, leading to starvation. The Galactic Council sent emergency repair teams to help, but these teams often caused more damage than they fixed. Different alien species had completely different approaches to technology. The machine-like collective wanted to replace everything with robotic systems. The Organic Alliance wanted to use living technology for all repairs. The crystalline Zephyrians insisted on using pure mathematical solutions that did not work in the real world. These teams spent more time arguing with each other than actually fixing problems. Sometimes they would tear apart a working system because they disagreed about how to improve it. Other times they would refuse to work together at all, leaving broken equipment untouched while people suffered. The situation became much worse when the Velkari Empire decided to expand their territory. These aggressive aliens had been planning invasions for years, but they had always been stopped by the threat of unified galactic response. Human military advisors had created defense treaties that would bring dozens of species together to fight any major aggressor. Now the Velkari realized that these treaties were worthless. Without human coordination, the different species could not work together effectively. Their ships used different communication systems. Their weapons had different power sources. Their military tactics were completely incompatible. The Velkari struck first at the peaceful Thani colonies, the same worlds that had asked for council help a year earlier. This time, there was no debate about whether to respond. The council immediately sent a joint military force to defend the Thani people. The joint force was a disaster. The crystalline Zephyrian ships moved too slowly to keep up with the Organic Alliance vessels. The gaseous nebuloids could not operate in the same space as the machine collective forces because their energy fields interfered with each other. The aquatic deep swarm required special environment suits that made them clumsy in combat. Worst of all, none of the species could understand each other's battle plans. The Zephyrians made complex mathematical strategies that took hours to explain. The Alliance used emotional and instinctive tactics that seemed random to logical minds. The collective fought like individual machines instead of coordinated units. The Velkari had been studying these problems for months. Their spies had watched every failed council military exercise. They knew exactly how to exploit the confusion and poor coordination of the joint forces. The battle lasted only 6 hours before the council fleet retreated in complete defeat. Emboldened by this easy victory, the Velkari launched attacks on 6 more worlds. Each time, the council response was slower and less effective. Within 3 months, the Velkari Empire had conquered 27 star systems and enslaved billions of innocent people. The refugee crisis grew beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. Millions of people fled from Velkari invasion forces, but they had nowhere safe to go. The refugee coordination system that humans had built over decades collapsed within weeks of the first major attacks. Nara had been the chief refugee coordinator for the council. She was a brilliant sociologist who understood how different species could live together peacefully. Her protocols had successfully managed refugee populations during dozens of smaller conflicts, but those protocols required human administrators who understood the complex social dynamics involved. The new alien administrators tried to follow Nara's written procedures, but they did not understand the reasoning behind them. They put species together that were natural enemies. They gave food to aliens that could not digest it. They housed water-breathing species in dry environments and air-breathing species in flooded areas. The refugee camps became scenes of constant conflict and suffering. Different species fought over limited resources. Cultural misunderstandings led to riots and violence. Disease spread rapidly when aliens with different biologies were forced to live in close quarters. Some camps were abandoned, entirely when the administrators gave up trying to manage them. Refugees were left without food, medicine, or shelter. Thousands died from preventable diseases and starvation. Others turned to crime or joined rebel groups just to survive. The economic collapse was just as devastating as the military and humanitarian disasters. The Nexus Trade Compact, which had regulated galactic commerce for over a century, fell apart completely. Human economists Wu Jin and Ye Jin had created a system so complex and interconnected that no one else could understand how it worked. The trade agreements had balanced thousands of different factors. They considered the production capacity of each world, the transportation costs between systems, the cultural preferences of different species, and the seasonal variations in supply and demand. They also included complex formulas for adjusting prices when unexpected events disrupted normal trade patterns. Without human oversight, trade disputes multiplied rapidly. Species began cheating on their agreements, knowing that no one could calculate whether they were paying fair prices. Some worlds hoarded essential goods to drive up prices. Others flooded markets with cheap products that destroyed local industries. Currency values fluctuated wildly as confidence in the galactic economy collapsed. The standard galactic credit, which had been stable for 2 centuries, lost half its value in 6 months. Some species refused to accept credits at all and demanded payment in raw materials or finished goods. Food shortages became common as agricultural worlds could not find reliable buyers for their crops. Industrial worlds could not get the raw materials they needed to keep their factories running. Advanced technology worlds found that no one could afford their expensive products. The final disaster came when the ancient void gates began failing. These massive structures were the key to galactic civilization. They created artificial wormholes that allowed ships to travel instantly between distant star systems. Without the gates, a journey that took minutes would take years. The gates were incredibly old and mysterious. They had been built by a vanished civilization millions of years ago. Most of their technology was beyond current understanding, but human engineers had learned to maintain them through careful observation and experimentation. Il Sung had been the chief gate technician for 40 years. Il Sung had started as a young apprentice who cleaned the maintenance tools. Over decades of work, he had developed an almost supernatural understanding of how the gates functioned. He could hear problems in the harmonic vibrations of the gate crystals. He could smell chemical changes in the exotic matter conduits. He could feel disruptions in the quantum field alignments by touching the control panels. This kind of intuitive knowledge could not be taught from books or computer programs. It came from years of hands-on experience and careful attention to subtle details. 2 years had passed since humanity left the Galactic Council, and the galaxy was dying. Su Bin floated in her crystal matrix, feeling the vibrations of desperation that filled the emergency council session. She had been one of the strongest opponents of human membership when they first applied to join 3 centuries ago. Now she was desperately trying to convince her fellow council members to beg humanity to return. The statistics were horrifying. Half of all council worlds were either at war, under Velkari occupation, or suffering from complete infrastructure collapse. The communication network was down to 30% capacity. Trade had dropped to levels not seen since before the council was formed. Refugee populations had grown to over 2 billion displaced beings with nowhere safe to go. The other Zephyrian Council members listened to Su Bin's plea with growing discomfort. Their species prided itself on logical thinking and mathematical precision. Admitting they had made such a massive error in judgment went against everything they believed about their own superiority. The humans were unpredictable, argued Elder Counselor Velzar, his crystal form flashing with stubborn blue light. Their emotional responses created chaos in our decision-making processes. Their emotional responses prevented wars, Su Bin replied, her own crystals glowing with frustrated orange energy. We have had more conflicts in 2 years without them than we had in 50 years with them. The debate continued for hours, but Su Bin could see that most of her fellow Zephyrians would never admit their mistake. They preferred to believe that the current chaos was a temporary problem that would solve itself eventually. Meanwhile, a secret group of younger council members was taking action on their own. Raywan of the Deepsworn had been watching the disaster unfold with growing horror. As one of the aquatic species, her people valued harmony and cooperation above all else. The current state of galactic civilization went against everything she believed in. Raywan had spent months building a network of like-minded beings from various species. They called themselves the Reform Coalition, and they shared one common goal: bring humanity back to help save the galaxy. They knew that the Elder Council members would never approve such an action, so they decided to work in secret. The Coalition's first challenge was finding a way to contact Earth. Official diplomatic channels had been closed since humanity's departure. All human embassies had been shut down. Even private communication links had been severed. The humans had made it clear they wanted nothing to do with Council space. After weeks of searching, Raywan found an old contact file that listed Young Su as a former diplomatic attaché. He had been one of the junior human representatives during the final years before humanity's withdrawal. The file showed that he had returned to Earth and was now living in a rural area of Korea. Getting a message to Young Su required bribing several communication technicians and routing the signal through independent relay stations. When the connection finally went through, Raywan found herself speaking to a middle-aged human who was working in a rice field. Young Su listened patiently as Raywan explained the situation in Council space. She told him about the wars, the EI, refugee crisis, the infrastructure failures, and the spreading chaos. She begged him to convince Earth's government to send help. "We know we made mistakes," Raywan said, her aquatic form rippling with emotion. "We treated your people badly. We ignored your advice. We took your contributions for granted, but billions of innocent beings are suffering because of our errors. Please help us fix this." Young Su was quiet for a long time after she finished speaking. He looked out over his peaceful farm, where the only sounds were birds singing and wind rustling through the rice plants. Finally, he turned back to the communication screen. "I tried to warn you," he said simply. 2 years ago, I told your council that removing human oversight would lead to disaster. Your leaders called me an alarmist. They said other species could learn to handle these responsibilities. They were wrong, Raywan admitted. We all were wrong. We need your help. Young Su shook his head sadly. Even if I wanted to help, I have no influence with my government. They have made it clear that humanity will not return to being second-class citizens in the council. If you want our help, you need to offer something better than what we had before. The conversation ended with no promises, but Raywan felt a small spark of hope. At least the humans were willing to talk. That was more progress than the official council had made in 2 years. The Reform Coalition continued their secret efforts to establish contact with Earth. They reached out to former human colleagues, tried to open trade negotiations, and even offered to share advanced technology in exchange for technical assistance. Most of these attempts were ignored or politely declined. The situation became truly desperate when the Velkari Empire deployed weapons that had been banned for thousands of years. The planet-killer devices had been contained by ancient treaties that humans had helped negotiate and maintain. Sang-hoon had been the xenoarchaeologist responsible for understanding the containment protocols. Sang-hoon had spent 30 years studying the ruins left by the galaxy's oldest civilizations. He had learned to read languages that had been dead for millions of years. More importantly, he had understood the warnings these ancient peoples had left about certain weapons that should never be used. The planet killers were massive bombs that could destabilize a star and cause it to explode. The destruction would spread through entire solar systems, killing everything within dozens of light years. The ancient civilizations had used these weapons during their final wars, and they had written detailed warnings about why they should never be used again. The containment treaties required constant monitoring and maintenance. Special vault systems kept the weapons sealed and inactive. These vaults needed regular inspections and complex ritual procedures to prevent accidental activation. Sang-hoon had been the only person who fully understood these procedures. Without his knowledge, the vault monitoring systems began to fail. The Velkari discovered 3 planet-killer weapons in abandoned vaults and managed to activate them. Their first target was the Zephyrian capital world, home to 5 billion crystal beings. The attack was devastating beyond imagination. The star, went supernova, destroying everything in the solar system instantly. The shock waves spread outward at the speed of light, sterilizing a dozen nearby systems and making them uninhabitable for centuries. In one moment, the Velkari had demonstrated that they could destroy entire civilizations. Panic spread throughout Council space. Every species realized that they could be next. The Velkari sent messages to all remaining Council worlds demanding immediate surrender. They promised that worlds that submitted peacefully would be spared, but those that resisted would face the same fate as the Zephyrian capital. The panic grew worse when scientists realized that more planet-killer weapons were probably hidden in other ancient vaults throughout the galaxy. Without Song-Hoon's expertise, they had no way to find these vaults or secure the weapons inside them. The Velkari could have dozens of planet killers, and no one would know until they used them. This was when even the most stubborn council members finally admitted they needed human help. Boram, a human cultural anthropologist, received an unprecedented communication from the remaining Zephyrian leadership. It was a formal apology for their treatment of humanity, along with a detailed analysis of their mistakes. The document was over 1,000 pages long and represented months of work by Zephyrian scholars. They admitted that they had completely misunderstood human psychology and social abilities. They acknowledged that human emotional intelligence was actually a sophisticated form of social engineering that had prevented countless conflicts. "We calculated intelligence based on processing speed and memory capacity," the document stated. "We failed to recognize that true wisdom comes from understanding the balance between logic and intuition. Humans possessed this wisdom, and we dismissed it as primitive emotionalism." The apology was sincere but came too late. Boram forwarded it to Earth's government with a note that it should be preserved in the historical archives. She did not recommend any response. The final crisis came when the synthesis plague broke containment. This was an ancient nanovirus that had been contained for 8 centuries in a research facility on the edge of Council space. The virus was incredibly dangerous because it could rewrite the genetic code of any living being, turning them into something completely different. Human. Biomedical researchers Haewon and Changmin had maintained the containment systems for decades. They understood that the plague was not just a disease, but a form of alien technology that required careful handling. The containment protocols were complex and required intuitive understanding of biological systems. The alien scientists who replaced them tried to follow the written procedures, but they did not understand the underlying principles. They made small changes to the containment systems that seemed logical but actually weakened the barriers. When a minor earthquake damaged the facility, the plague escaped. The virus spread to 17 worlds before anyone realized what was happening. Affected beings began changing into horrific hybrid creatures that were neither fully alive nor completely dead. 3 years had passed since humanity left the Galactic Council, and Inho watched from Earth's deep space array as the last council session ended in chaos. Only 12 species had sent representatives to what was supposed to be an emergency meeting. The others were either dead, conquered by the Velkari Empire, or too busy fighting for survival to attend political meetings. The session lasted only 40 minutes before the remaining council members gave up trying to reach agreements. Without enough species present, they could not vote on any proposals. The Galactic Council, which had governed the galaxy for over 10,000 years, officially dissolved when the last representative walked out of the empty chamber. Inho filed his report and sent it to Earth's government. The message was simple. The Council was dead, the galaxy was in chaos, and humanity was now completely alone. For the first time in 3 centuries, Earth had no formal diplomatic relationships with any alien civilizations. But this isolation did not last long. Within days of the Council's collapse, individual species began reaching out to Earth directly. They were no longer asking humans to return to the old system. Instead, they were begging for help in building something new. The first to arrive was Seonyu, representing the Botanical Collective. Her people were plant-like beings who valued peace and growth above all else. They had never been aggressive or warlike, but they had also never challenged the elder species' authority. Now their worlds were dying from infrastructure failures, and they needed help desperately. Seon-Yu's ship landed at the diplomatic facility in Geneva, Earth. She was the first alien to set foot on Earth in 3 years. Her message was simple and direct. We were wrong to follow the elder species blindly. We should have supported humanity when you tried to help others. Please teach us how to be better. Irin, Earth's new director of galactic affairs, met with Seon Yu in a small conference room. There were no grand ceremonies or formal protocols. Just two beings sitting across a table trying to figure out how to build a better future. We cannot return to the old system, Irin said firmly. Humanity will not accept junior status in any galactic organization. If we work together, it must be as equals. Seon Yu agreed immediately. Her people had seen what happened when the elder species made all the decisions. They wanted no part of that hierarchy anymore. The meeting lasted 6 hours and ended with the signing of the Geneva Accords. This was a simple agreement that established basic principles for cooperation. All species would be treated equally, decisions would be made by consensus rather than by age or size of empire, and no species would be forced to follow rules they had not helped create. Word of the Geneva Accords spread quickly through the surviving civilizations. Within weeks, representatives from 24 species had arrived on Earth asking to join the new partnership. They came not as proud diplomats, but as desperate survivors who had learned humility through suffering. The process was slow and careful. Each species had to prove that they genuinely accepted the principles of equality and cooperation. Some were rejected because they still showed signs of the old arrogance. Others were accepted only after agreeing to major changes in their government and military policies. The most important moment came when the Zephyrians requested permission to join the partnership. Subin arrived on Earth as the official representative of her people, but she came alone and without the crystal matrix that had once marked her high status. Her message was painful but necessary. We were the most wrong of all. We led the galaxy into disaster through our pride and prejudice. We ask not for forgiveness, but for the chance to learn from our mistakes. The decision to accept the Zephyrians was controversial. Many humans wanted to reject them as punishment for their past behavior, but Irin understood that building a better future required wisdom rather than revenge. They have suffered more than anyone, she told the Earth Council. Their homeworld was destroyed by the very weapons they failed to contain. Their civilization has been humbled completely. If we reject them now, we become the same kind of people they used to be. The Zephyrians were accepted into the partnership, but with strict conditions. They would have no special status despite their advanced technology. They would contribute their knowledge freely without expecting extra influence in return. Most importantly, they would help hunt down and secure the remaining planet-killer weapons that threatened the galaxy. But the partnership faced its greatest test when the Velkari Empire decided to attack Earth itself. The Velkari had conquered nearly half of the former Council space and grown incredibly powerful. Their leaders believed that defeating humanity would break the spirit of all remaining resistance. Taekyung commanded Earth's defense fleet from the bridge of the battleship Determination. He had spent 3 years preparing for this moment, knowing that the Velkari would eventually come for Earth. What the Velkari did not know was that humanity had used their time away from galactic politics to develop new technologies. Free from Council restrictions on aggressive research, human scientists led by Min Seo and Jae Hyun had created defensive systems that made Earth nearly invincible. They had built energy shields that could deflect planet-killer weapons. They had developed new types of weapons that could disable enemy ships without destroying them. Most importantly, they had learned to coordinate perfectly with their new, alien partners. The Battle of Sol began when a massive Velkari invasion fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the solar system. The fleet included over 3,000 warships, including the largest dreadnoughts ever built. The Velkari were confident that their overwhelming numbers would crush human resistance quickly. They were wrong. The battle lasted exactly 6 hours and ended with the complete destruction or capture of every Velkari ship. Not a single enemy vessel escaped to report back to their empire. The Velkari learned too late that humanity had not spent 3 years, growing weak but growing stronger. The victory at Sol was achieved not just through superior technology, but through perfect cooperation between species. Zephyrian computers calculated targeting solutions in microseconds. Botanical collective ships provided healing support for damaged vessels. Deep-sworn aquatic crews handled underwater defensive stations around Earth's oceans. Most importantly, human commanders like Taekyung coordinated all these different capabilities into a single devastating response. The Velkari had never faced an enemy that could combine logic and intuition, technology and biology, individual skill and group cooperation. News of the Velkari defeat spread throughout the galaxy within days. The message was clear. The old empire that had terrorized so many worlds was not invincible. Species that had submitted to Velkari rule began to rebel. Worlds that had been conquered started fighting for their freedom. The partnership offered help to any world that wanted to resist Velkari occupation. They provided military support, medical aid, and reconstruction assistance. But they also made it clear that liberation came with responsibilities. Any world that wanted partnership help had to accept partnership principles. This approach worked because it offered something the old council never had: hope for a better future. Instead of just fighting against the Velkari, liberated worlds were fighting for a new kind of galactic civilization based on equality and cooperation. Gun-Hu became Earth's ambassador to the liberation movement. He worked tirelessly to help. Former Velkari colonies established new governments based on partnership principles. The work was hard and sometimes dangerous, but it was also incredibly rewarding. The most satisfying moment came when the Velkari capital world itself requested partnership assistance. The empire had collapsed from within as its own people turned against their leaders. The planet's population was starving and desperate, abandoned by the military leaders who had fled to distant hideouts. The partnership vote on whether to help the former enemy was close, but it passed. Human medical teams led by Reconstructed, hospitals and food distribution centers. Zephyrian engineers helped rebuild damaged infrastructure. Botanical collective farmers planted new crops to feed the hungry population. The transformation was not instant or easy. It took months of careful work to help the former imperial world become a peaceful member of the growing partnership. But the success proved that even the most aggressive species could change when given the right opportunities and support. The partnership continued to grow as more species learned about the new model of galactic cooperation. Unlike the old council, which had been controlled by ancient species who claimed wisdom through age, the partnership valued contributions over status. Young civilizations had as much voice as old ones. Small species had as much influence as large ones. Hyojin was one of the new generation of human diplomats who worked in the partnership's governing body. She was young and had never experienced the frustrations of working under the old council system. For her, equality between species was normal and natural. She often worked in the partnership's main assembly hall, which had been designed to reflect the new principles of cooperation. Instead of elevated seats for elder species, all representatives stood on the same level. Instead of formal hierarchies, decisions were made through open discussion and consensus building. This is how it should always have been,